Welcome to the dark side of love on Valentine's Day, a day celebrated with hearts and roses. But on this fateful date in 1929, in the heart of Chicago, the pulse of organized crime beats with a chilling fervor. As the city prepared for the evening's romantic escapades, a group of 7 men assembled in a garage on North Clark Street. Minutes later, they would become the victims of one of history's most infamous gangland slaughters, their lives snuffed out in a haze of bullets. This is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, a harrowing tale that dives deep into the underbelly of American crime, a story woven with revenge, power struggles, and the unforgiving pursuit of dominance. Who was who? Al Capone, a name that reverberates through time like a gunshot in the dark. By the age of 30, he had become the undisputed kingpin of Chicago's underworld. Born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1899 to Italian immigrants, Capone traveled the murky waters of crime from a young age. He began his career in the notorious Five Points gang in New York and quickly made his way through the ranks. Charismatic yet ruthless, his innate business acumen and brutality in eliminating rivals made him a feared figure. His rise to power came amid Prohibition, where the illegal alcohol trade turned into a goldmine that he exploited with ease. Contrasting with Capone's brazen persona was George "Bugs" Moran, the embattled leader of the North Side Gang, who donned a facade of a more refined gangster. Born in 1893 in Illinois, Moran experienced a turbulent childhood marked by the hardships of poverty. He became embroiled in the criminal world after becoming a key player in O'Banion's crew, a group defined by its fierce independence and pride. Unlike Capone, who basked in the public eye, Moran sought to maintain a sense of legitimacy, attempting to distance himself from the more sordid aspects of organized crime. Yet, beneath his disciplined exterior lay a man with blood on his hands, ready for war. Moran's leadership was a journey through carnage, as he inherited the position after a spate of assassinations claimed key figures like Dean O'Banion and Hemi Weiss. These struggles only served to embolden him, fueling a blood feud with Capone's Chicago outfit that had consequences that rippled through the city. Assisting Capone was Jack "Machine Gun" McGurn, a figure synonymous with lethal efficiency. Rumored to have been born in Italy, McGurn was not just a hitman. He was Capone's confidant whose loyalty was unwavering. His involvement in the organization wasn't merely for personal gain. It was tied to a complex relationship of respect and fear. McGurn had survived an assassination attempt that left him scarred but also eager for vengeance, further intensifying the impending plan to eliminate Moran. Among Moran's crew were Frank and Peter Gussenberg, enforcers with a fearsome reputation forged from a lifetime spent in the chaos of street battles. Their lives were marred by violence, yet they remained fiercely loyal to Moran, embodying the gang culture's violent ethos. Adam Heyer served as the gang's strategist, overseeing vital operations funded through their illicit activities, while Albert Weinshank, a close associate, gained notoriety for his resemblance to Moran, a characteristic that would prove fatal. Lastly, John May, an unsuspecting mechanic, would unknowingly step into a story of betrayal, revealing the tragedy that could befall anyone caught in the crossfire. The tension builds. The 1920s marked a transformative period in American society, imbued with the spirit of post-war prosperity but shadowed by the dark underbelly of organized crime. The enactment of Prohibition in 1920 served as a catalyst, inciting a fierce struggle over the lucrative alcohol trade. Gangs fought not just for profits, but for dominance in the urban landscape. Rivalries escalated into unrelenting wars, and Chicago became a battleground where blood was spilled on the streets with alarming frequency. The North Side and South Side gangs were embroiled in a conflict that was more than a series of turf wars. It was a visceral clash of ideals where loyalty was tested and betrayal could lead to a death sentence. Moran, facing the specter of Capone's offshoot, became increasingly desperate to uphold his power. Capone's Chicago outfit was not only strategically sophisticated with its political connections, but also heavily armed, a contrast sharpened by Moran's dwindling resources and manpower. The tension reached a boiling point following an assassination attempt on McGurn. For Moran, it wasn't just about survival, it was personal. As whispers of deceit and betrayal circulated, both sides prepared for an inevitable confrontation. The desperation on Moran's side would soon turn into venomous resolve, while Capone poised himself to deliver a fatal blow to his rival. As February 1929 approached, Capone's choices were calculated. He painstakingly crafted an elaborate plan, utilizing a ruse that would draw Moran's men into a trap. The bait was a false whiskey deal, a lure promising cheap liquor, and the venue, the SMC Cartage Garage in Lincoln Park. The target date was secured, February 14th, Valentine's Day, a day when romantic celebrations unknowingly masked a deadly intention. The massacre. The morning of February 14th broke cold and bleak over Chicago, an unassuming prelude to chaos. 7 men gathered inside the garage, discussing the prospects of their illicit dealings, unaware they were teetering on the edge of a catastrophe. Moran himself was absent, having been forewarned by intuition and perhaps fate, a twist of luck that would ultimately save his life. As the men awaited the anticipated alcohol delivery, 2 imposters clad in police uniforms entered alongside 2 associates in civilian clothes. The garage, once a fortress of camaraderie, transformed into a tableau of impending doom. Under the false pretense of a police raid, Moran's crew was ordered to line up against the wall. The command was obeyed dutifully. They mistook the moment for routine. And then came the onslaught. What followed was an eruption of gunfire that shattered the morning stillness. Thompson submachine guns unleashed a storm of bullets, a relentless symphony of violence that saw more than 70 rounds fired. The precision was chilling. The executioners were methodical, demonstrating no hint of mercy as they ensured that each life was extinguished. Frank and Peter Gussenberg fell among the dead, with Peter gasping for breath but refusing to betray any secrets, silencing any possibility of revenge for his fallen comrades. Amidst the carnage, the garage resembled a battlefield more than a criminal headquarters, with blood pooling around bodies and chaos painting a grim portrait of the depths of this ongoing war. Tragically, innocent John May, the mechanic, was caught in a storm he never asked to be in, bringing his dog, Highball, into the fray. The animal, bewildered and frightened, would ultimately serve as a reminder of the collateral damage left in the wake of avarice and betrayal. Aftermath. As the news of the massacre spread like wildfire, the shockwaves reverberated across the nation. The violent display condemned Chicago's gangsters in a new and troubling light. No longer were they seen as mere criminals operating in the shadows. The massacre exposed the shocking brutality that lay beneath the armor of organized crime. Images of the crime scene splashed across newspapers, the bodies lined up stark against the cold concrete. The public could hardly fathom that such atrocities could unfold under the very nose of law enforcement. In the immediate aftermath, Al Capone distanced himself from the chaos, declaring his alibi of being in Miami, a tactic designed to deflect the heat from his back. Jack McGurn was arrested, but his fate was sealed by a steadfast alibi provided by his girlfriend, a web of deceit that ensured he wouldn't face justice. Fred "Killer" Burke stood accused as another suspect, but fell victim to a legal system fraught with ineffectiveness, illustrating the pervasive fear and corruption that characterized the gangland of Chicago. The fallout of the massacre catalyzed a shift in American public opinion. For many, it was a turning point that laid bare the realities of organized crime. The perception of gangsters shifted from charming anti-heroes to ruthless predators, chasing wealth and power at any cost. Law enforcement, long bribed and hamstrung by the fear of gang retribution, found its footing in the wake of this horrifying event. Elliot Ness and his team, known as the Untouchables, emerged as steadfast champions against Chicago's corruption. They couldn't pin Capone with murder, but they sought to strip his empire through another avenue: tax evasion. This pursuit would ultimately lead to Capone's demise, marking an end to his rule over Chicago and a step towards dismantling the organized crime infrastructure that had thrived in the dark for too long. The legacy. This St. Valentine's Day massacre reverberated through the years, leaving an indelible mark on American society. It wasn't just an isolated event. It laid bare the breadth and depth of organized crime, shedding light on the ruthless lengths to which individuals would go in their pursuit of dominance. The massacre served as a stark reminder that violence had consequences beyond the immediate, shaping the landscape of law enforcement and criminology in profound ways. As the investigation unfolded, Calvin Goddard's innovative work in ballistics began a new era in forensic science, allowing future investigators to tie bullets to specific firearms, a technique that would become fundamental in criminal investigations. Yet, despite the advancement in methods and the ensuing governmental reforms, many questions lingered unanswered, with no justice ever served for the lives snuffed out that winter morning. Capone's empire would ultimately crumble under the weight of federal scrutiny, culminating in a conviction for tax evasion in 1931 that stripped him of his freedom and, to some extent, his haunting legacy. He spent the final years of his life in a federal prison, suffering the consequences of a life lived in shadows, forever haunted by the bloodshed he caused. George "Bugs" Moran, on the other hand, never managed to reclaim his place in the criminal hierarchy. The fallout from the massacre left him a shell of the leader he had once been, fading into obscurity before passing away in prison years later, far removed from the chaos that once defined his reign. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre transformed the narrative surrounding organized crime forever. It served as a wake-up call, compelling society to confront the stark reality of violence that existed just beyond the veil of normalcy. The era of flamboyant gangster tales gave way to a more serious understanding of crime. Stories of intrigue and excitement morphed into solemn reminders of the fragility of life in the face of greed and ambition. As we draw the curtain on this harrowing chapter of American history, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre emerges not merely as a brutal footnote in the saga of organized crime, but as a profound turning point that shook the foundations of society. The chilling scene of betrayal, where 7 lives were extinguished in a matter of moments, echoes far beyond the walls of that garage on North Clark Street. It reverberates through the corridors of time, leaving behind a legacy rife with lessons learned from the depths of human ambition, brutality, and the relentless quest for power. This violent event starkly illuminated the grim reality of Prohibition-era America, where the intoxicating allure of a legal fortune spawned a ruthless underworld. The rivalry between Capone and Moran was not simply a clash of criminal enterprises. It was a visceral struggle for dignity, survival, and identity within a society that often exalted the very outlaw culture it simultaneously sought to condemn. The massacre, therefore, stands as a testament to the violent extremes to which individuals would go to protect their turf and assert their dominance, catalyzing a grim transformation in public sentiment toward the criminal elite. In the aftermath of the massacre, the American public witnessed more than just a spike in anxiety over crime. They confronted the unsettling truth that heroism and villainy could coexist within the murky waters of mob life. The nation's fascination with gangsters, once tinged with glamour and intrigue, swiftly morphed into horror and disgust. The bloodshed propelled society into a reckoning with the moral complexities of crime, emphasizing the need to reconsider the narratives that had romanticized violence and lawlessness. Law enforcement, galvanized by the public outcry following the massacre, emerged from the shadows with renewed vigor, marking the dawn of a new era in crime fighting. The rise of figures like Elliot Ness and his Untouchables encapsulated a collective yearning for justice, an ambitious drive to dismantle the criminal empires that had long operated with impunity. As government agencies began to adapt and evolve in response to escalating criminal acts, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre served as the catalyst for change, laying bare the inadequacies of the system and igniting a fierce determination to eradicate the scourge of organized crime from America's streets. Yet amidst this landscape of brutality and retribution, the individual stories of those caught in the crossfire serve as poignant reminders of the fragility of life. John May, the innocuous mechanic who unwittingly stepped into a battle not of his making, becomes a symbol of the collateral damage inflicted by the relentless pursuit of power. His tragic fate underscores the notion that in the war for supremacy, innocent lives are often the most vulnerable casualties, lost to the unforgiving nature of a conflict defined by ambition, greed, and betrayal. Even as the dust settled over the scene of violence, the consequences of that day continued to unfurl like ripples in a pond. For Al Capone, the massacre marked the peak of a reign shadowed by imminent decline. The once mighty kingpin found his empire besieged on all sides, eventually succumbing to the relentless pursuit of justice and the insatiable pressure of public opinion. In stark contrast, George "Bugs" Moran, whose aspirations dwindled in the wake of the violence, would fade into obscurity, a fading figure in a world that had swiftly turned against him. The enduring legacy of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre encompasses more than just the notorious events of that day. It presents an enduring narrative of the human experience, marked by the eternal struggle between ambition and morality. The insatiable desire for power, when intertwined with violence, exposes the stark reality of human nature and the chaos that often ensues when greed takes precedence over compassion and community. In examining the consequences of this infamous act, we are reminded that society's narrative is deeply intertwined with the tales of those who have walked both the paths of light and shadow. This St. Valentine's Day Massacre serves as an unyielding reminder that the choices we make, whether driven by ambition or desperation, can echo throughout history, shaping future generations in ways we may never fully comprehend. As we reflect on the chilling events that unfolded on that fateful day, we find ourselves at a crossroads, where history beckons us to learn from the past. The lessons of ambition, consequence, and the quest for identity remain salient in today's world, urging us to remain vigilant against the seductive allure of power and to foster a society rooted in understanding, respect, and accountability. In confronting these themes, we can honor the memories of those lost, ensuring that their stories resonate beyond the shadows, illuminating the path toward a more just and compassionate world. The screen fades to black, the music softening, leaving the audience with a sense of introspection and a call to remember the darker chapters of history as we navigate the complexities of humanity. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of a significant yet tragic moment in history. As we delve deeper into the shadows of our past, it is vital to remember that even the darkest tales offer us crucial lessons in the pursuit of justice and the understanding of human nature. The echoes of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre remind us of the thin line between power and chaos, and the responsibility we hold in shaping our narratives moving forward. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and consider subscribing to my channel CyberTheo.